Hey, welcome to the MrMaple Show. Today we're here at Blue Ridge Daylilies to give you some tips on growing daylilies.
Now, Blue Ridge Daylilies is a business here in Western North Carolina, about 35 minutes north of MrMaple.com. Really close. They're open during the bloom season, so you can definitely come by, check them out. They've got some of the most exquisite daylilies, and many of them that they've hybridized right here, and amazing daylilies. So from the experts, what are some of your tips on growing daylilies for someone's just getting into daylilies?
One of the first things I would say is to amend your soil.
And that basically, the reason for that too is because they need good drainage. Daylilies like water, okay, but they don't want to sit in a clay bowl because eventually they're going to rot. Just like any plant, they need good drainage. But what Bob was saying is when you mix those amendments in, it loosens up the soil, raises the soil level, all that contributes to good drainage, and then the roots can grab the nutrients a little more readily as well. Another thing that daylilies need is at least 6 hours of full sun. You can do a little dappled sun, that's usually okay. Don't want to go less than that. They will still survive, they will still bloom a little bit, but you'll see a big drop down in your bud count and in your overall buds.
And an inch of water a week is about right. If you don't get enough rain, if you can supplemental water, that will really help. And also, daylilies are big feeders. They need extra nitrogen, and the easiest way to do that is lawn fertilizer. That's the perfect formula. It's high nitrogen and low middle number, and if you can get that in time release, you won't burn up your plants, and you'll have nice big tall daylilies with green foliage like you see here.
Oh, that's great advice.
Now, is deadheading, I've often heard that can increase bloom production. Is that true?
No, it just makes it look prettier, really.
Okay, so when you're removing the finished blooms, myth busted right there. It basically just makes it look prettier. What's the biggest mistake people make when starting out with daylilies?
One of the mistakes could be planting them too close together, because if you plant one, it could eventually take up 2.5 feet of airspace.
So Bob always tells them, please just water them once. Let Mother Nature, just every 2 or 3 days, give them a drink of water. Don't overwater.
Now, what advice do y'all have for people wanting to divide a daylily? Is there a time frame that works best?
Pretty much whenever you have time.
Right.
Some people swear by the spring, some people only do it in the fall. But if you plant a daylily right now, it will make new roots for next year, for all the rest of this year. If you wait until October, they're just going to sit there until next year.
We dig in the garden from mid-June through almost early November when we're lining out in the fall. And so we'll dig a clump, we'll put things back, and then a few weeks later they're looking great, and a few more weeks they're ready to go. So, as long as it's not freezing and there's no chance of a freeze within, say, 6 weeks, that's probably safe.
Now, I've been to some of the daylily conventions before, and I've seen them when they have them all divided up. They've got them all cut back with scissors, cut the daylily plants back. Is that necessary when you're dividing up daylilies?
We cut them back to about 8 inches, the foliage.
In the fall.
And it's mainly just so you have less ugly to look at, because it's natural for them to yellow a little bit, but they immediately start growing new leaves.
So basically, if you want it to look tidy and have less cleanup in the spring, you want to cut that foliage back, a few weeks before the season ends. It's not going to hurt the plant to just leave it and just clean it up in the spring, but it's a little bit messy at times. So it's just personal preference.
And when we line them out, we cut them back because it's easier to see what you're doing. Some people like straight rows more than others. I like
this guy is meticulous about straight rows.
You've got some straight rows here. It's amazing.
We have a huge property here, but you will only see straight rows, I promise.
So is it a positive or negative thing when it comes to daylilies?
Mulch can help retain moisture in the soil, so it can be a good thing, but usually a couple inches should be good. It also cuts down on weeds, and up north they can grow daylilies that are a little more tender if they mulch. We don't mulch because we want to know that everything is winter hardy to at least zone 6. So if they're not happy in our garden, then we don't sell them.
And the downside to mulch is if you use a lot of mulch, you need to increase your amount of nitrogen you put back into the soil. Because as that mulch, the wood breaks down, it depletes the nitrogen from your soil. And obviously, like Bob said earlier, daylilies like nitrogen, especially the first half of the season. And so just put that nitrogen back in and you should be fine.
So we're here today at Blue Ridge Daylilies, and we want to get into a little bit about daylilies with you, but also a little bit about daylily hybridizing.
So we're here with Eric Simpson. Eric, how many different daylilies have you hybridized throughout the years, and how many have you selected?
Oh my gosh, that's impossible to answer. I've introduced about 150 plus, got thousands of seedlings in different stages of development, from newly planted all the way up to maybe 8 years being evaluated, and we have different beds for different stages of that.
So what exactly is daylily hybridizing?
Basically, hybridizing is creating your own cultivars, your own flowers, by pollinating, taking the pollen from one flower that you really like and placing it on the pistil, the female part of another flower, to combine those genetics and to see what's going to happen. And there's a lot involved in that as well.
So, out of how many does it take to get to one plant? How many duds do you get before you get that winner?
A lot. I remember the first time I had many years ago, my very first seedlings were going to bloom. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to be so beautiful. I went out with my camera first thing in the morning. I go out and it was the ugliest, muddiest, brownest thing I've ever seen. And then they got better after that, obviously. I didn't give up.
So through that process, what have you learned to look for in specific flower, like mother flower versus father flower, or does that make a difference?
Sure. For those of you that are thinking about hybridizing, that maybe you'll see this video and say, hey, that sounds like something that I might want to do. It's a very exciting thing to do, but you need to kind of stick with it. And I will say that we get this question a lot. How do I need to hybridize? Well, I can hybridize for myself. Bob hybridized for himself. I can't tell you what you like. There's so much diversity in daylilies, like we mentioned before.
Right.
So just visualize what you want to achieve. Take a look at your garden and you might say, hey, I really like for me, when I started, I wanted to create glowing color. I like the colors that really pop. So if that's your thing, just pick out the colors that really speak to you and think about what you want to achieve, how you want to change a daylily, whether you want to combine the colors, make it bigger, smaller, add ruffles, add patterns, maybe multicolors, which I do a talk creating color combinations in daylily hybridizing as well. And it's very specific to the individual. So just kind of tap into your creative side and just go to work. What a lot of people do when they first start out is just put pretty on pretty, and that's okay, but you're going to end up with hundreds and hundreds of seeds and seedlings, and you're going to be like, yeah, these aren't really what I wanted to do. I suggest you really think it through and just be creative and pick the daylilies that really speak to you and kind of have a goal. And I will tell you this, I know I'm chattering a lot, but this is important because your seedlings will lead you in their own direction at times. There's been times when I've bloomed seedlings and I thought, that's exactly what I wanted to see. But there's also been many times when it's like, oh my God, those are dogs or yarners.
Right.
But occasionally you get a seedling that's like, wow, what is this? And then you start using those genetics and you create your own look or your own lines, just like with any of the other plant kingdom, those of you that do this in other species.
So is it you're just kind of going off by chance, or if you're like picking two flowers, like you want a really bright green eye, so you're picking two flowers with that bright green eye. They might have, different external colors, but you're going for that bright green eye. Are you picking two similar flowers to achieve that, or is it like really just by chance of the seedling?
It depends on the individual. That's exactly what you can do. And a lot of people think, oh, this flower looks like this flower, I need to cross those together. That's the opposite of what I want to achieve in my life. I want something different. I want something distinctive, something that you've never seen before. And that's not easy to do.
Okay.
But it's certainly, some people will do that because the green throats are a fairly new thing the last few years. People were working with Tet Rose F. Kennedy and Rose F. Kennedy, the diploid, because it has a very brilliant green throat. And so we're seeing a lot of things now in different colors with that bright green throat, and that's what they've done. They've just kept crossing those green throats onto green throats, and that, you know, you can do that with any specific trait within the daylily.
So on the basics side of things with the hybridizing, there's the diploids and the tetraploids.
Yes.
And the diploids don't really typically hybridize with the tetraploids, and the tetraploids don't typically hybridize with the tetraploids.
Right.
What is the basics of actually cross-pollinating? Is it you take the pollen off the one that you want the best traits of, or do you typically go, does it matter male or female?
Oh, so basically, so your question is, do I need to say, okay, this needs to be the pod parent, this needs to be the pollen parent? Not really. Now, some people will say, you know, your pod parents determine your bud count or blah, blah, blah. I don't know, that might be true. We don't really pay attention to that. You know, we've done crosses where a lot of times we do long crosses, we got a big garden. I mean, most people just have a little clump here and there.
Right.
A long cross is basically a bed of the same thing, and we just put like the same pollen on that bed all season and vice versa. We cross-pollinate. And then that way you can get a really good sampling of everything you're going to possibly see from that cross.
Wow.
We might bloom 200 seedlings, and some will be very different, some will be very similar, but not one will be exactly the same. And that's the fun thing about it, because we always tell new people that when your seedlings start to bloom and you go out into your field, it's like Christmas morning, because you're seeing something brand new that you've never seen, and then nobody in the world has ever seen that seedling but you. So that's what makes it special.
How long does it typically take for those new seedlings to bloom? How long does the process take from cross-pollinating for the seedlings to come up and then for them to bloom?
It depends on your location, your setup, and the hybridizer. We're in the mountains, we have a cool climate, we're 2,000 elevation. It takes a couple years for us because we get so busy, we don't always get to get the seeds in the ground, you know, when we want to. But from the time we get the seeds in the ground, we typically do that in the spring or early summer. And that's just us because of our schedule. And then we will see some bloom the next year, and then everything typically blooms the second year. Now down south, if you've got a different setup, some of the Florida southern climates, they can see bloom in, you know, 9 months, 10 months. You know, it's not going to be mature. It's not going to, you know, it's probably going to change as it starts to mature, because plant energy is so important. Basically, and also, like, if you plant a plant that you just received and you post a picture on Facebook, and then the hybridizer is like, oh my gosh, that's not really what that looks like. It's because that excited grower has a beautiful bloom and they think it's beautiful, but in the next year it's going to look much better. It's going to look like the picture or like it did in the garden when you bought it. And that's just part of the process.
You might have touched on this a little bit already, but what would you say is like the single biggest mistake people do when trying to get into hybridizing? Like what should you avoid?
Avoid putting it pretty on pretty and making hundreds and hundreds of seeds that you don't have anywhere to put in the ground, because it creates a lot of work. We see people on Facebook say, I planted 10,000 seeds this year. We're like, you go, because that's not what we want to do.
Right.
And as you start to develop a hybridizing program and you develop your eye and you kind of know your daylilies, you can start putting things together, and you could get more keepers percentage-wise than you would if you just went crazy putting pollen on all the pretty things.
Makes sense. I really appreciate you talking to us a little bit on daily hybridizing. I know you and Bob are some of the top hybridizers in the country on daylilies. And
we're right next door, so we
we're
can
next
help
door.
come over and talk to you about it.
Our pleasure indeed.
Hey, so where can people find you? What's the best way for people to find Blue Ridge Daylilies if they're watching this video and want to contact you or learn more about you?
Sure, we have a website, blueridgedaylilies.com, and you can check out our introductions there, or you can find us on Facebook at Blue Ridge Daylilies, and we have a daylily sales group on Facebook called Daylily Deals of the Day, where we post daylilies for sale, and we ship every day of the week. I'm sorry, every week, not every day of the week, once a week now until about October.
Such an honor.
Obviously in the garden when we open.
And they don't have just your common daylilies here. These things,
That's the cool stuff.
yeah, these things are the cool
It's the
daylilies.
plant geek stuff.
Exactly. And that's what we're geeking out about. That's why we came here today. And I really appreciate your time.
Hey, our pleasure. Thank you.